that have been launched to Israeli territory. A handful, only a few managed to penetrate Israeli territory. I implore you to adhere to the guidelines of IDF Home Front Command. We will continue to update you on the guidelines, and we will do as much as we can to balance between the highest goal of protecting human lives and trying to resume ordinary life. In Gaza, we have continued operating, and we will continue to operate across all the arenas and do our utmost effort to bring back the 53 hostages that are as a life-seeking society. We can overcome these threats, and I will continue to update you with any new information. Is Israel operating to remove the Iranian regime? We are working to remove the existential threat over Israel. This includes going after the nuclear program, all its aspects, the missile program, as we've seen. We continue to go after them. I will not divulge further plans. Channel 12. Following the strike to Soroka Hospital, and even stronger, Transportation Minister expects to disconnect Tehran from electricity. Is this going to happen? We continue to strike all across Tehran, going after its ballistic missile capabilities. Beyond that, I don't want to divulge to the Iranians our operational plans. 9/11. Why did why is IDF not protecting the spotters who have been in harm's danger? I want to commend the IDF spotters who are the eyes of the state. And we saw their heroism on October 7th, and we deeply value it. I hear these calls from the spotters, and we are continuously working to increase their protection. Thank you for the impacts that we saw today due to a shortage in interceptors. Be prepared for prolonged fighting. And taking into consideration all the scenarios, our defense is based on numerous aspects. One of those aspects is going after Iran's ballistic missiles across Iran. They continue to launch significant barrages at us. Also in our defense, our multi-layered air defense system is the most technologically advanced in the world, but it's not hermetic. Adherence to guidelines also in Soroka Hospital and elsewhere have saved lives. We continue with the Air Force to strike Iranian targets across their country, and this enables us to continue to
Bien, buenas noches a todos, bienvenidos a una nueva cobertura especial del conflicto en el Medio Oriente entre Israel e Irán. Y vengo a hablar sobre las últimas informaciones que me llegan en las redes sociales, y parece ser que Irán ha estado desconectado de la internet global durante 36 horas. No hay comunicación en internet, hay completa censura prácticamente. No se sabe nada de lo que pasa en Irán. Incluso trato de buscar los canales oficiales, pero no dicen nada. Por lo que es difícil saber de los acontecimientos. Según lo último, el canal 12 de Israel, el establishment de seguridad está monitoreando los intentos iraníes de atacar misiones o embajadas israelíes en todo el mundo. Entonces, ya creo que están preparando ataques a embajadas israelíes en varios países. Lo que esto podría intensificarse obviamente, como represalia, utilizar a sus proxies terroristas para atacar otros flancos. De hecho, el día de ayer o el día de hoy, en horas de la mañana, se produjo un ataque con misiles que causó bastantes destrozos. Esto fue hace 20 horas, que varios proyectiles impactaron en la ciudad de Tel Aviv y otros lugares, hasta en un hospital. También se informa que los miembros del Comité de Seguridad Nacional del Parlamento iraní están considerando cerrar el estrecho de Hormuz, que son una de las posibles opciones que tienen en caso tal. También se informa que Donald Trump va a tomar la decisión, supuestamente, no lo sé, que va a tomarse el tiempo de 2 semanas para tomar una decisión si va a atacar a Irán o no. ¿Quién sabe? Conociendo a Trump, es una persona impredecible, podría tomar la decisión hoy mismo o mañana, dentro de 3 días, o la próxima semana, o dentro de 2 semanas, no se sabe. Pero el caso es que hay muchas repercusiones acerca de esto. Según más informaciones, el director de la CIA, John Radcliffe, ha declarado en privado a sus funcionarios que Irán está muy cerca de construir armas nucleares. También hay información de que Israel espera que Estados Unidos tome una decisión sobre unirse a la guerra contra Irán dentro de las próximas 24 a 48 horas. Es decir, de mañana en 3 días, o no sé, este fin de semana se tiene que tomar una decisión. También se informa que Israel ha informado que solo el 65 de los misiles lanzados por Irán en las últimas 24 horas fueron interceptados por el sistema de la cúpula de hierro, frente al casi 90% del día anterior. Posiblemente a Israel se le están acabando los misiles y necesita más cargamento. También informa que funcionarios israelíes dicen que la espera para Trump no durará mucho si no decide unirse. Israel se va a encargar ellos solos. Ellos van a tomar la decisión ellos solos. Ellos van a atacar el complejo de Fordo, la instalación de Fordo. No sé cómo lo hará, pero creo que tiene sus métodos. Tiene muchas opciones para sabotearle esas instalaciones o destruírselas. Bastantes opciones, e incluso la opción de utilizar armas nucleares tácticas. Israel tiene la posibilidad de usar armamento de armas nucleares tácticas para destruir esas instalaciones en caso de que Estados Unidos no participe en el conflicto. También informa que American Airlines suspende vuelos en Doha, en Qatar, y United Airlines detiene el servicio diario en Dubái, citando la situación de seguridad en la región. El canal 14 de Israel habla de que Israel se prepara para un ataque por parte de agentes iraníes en Oriente Medio. También hay información de algunos funcionarios estadounidenses que afirman que Irán podría construir un arma nuclear en menos de 15 días. Si bien algunos analistas consideran ese plazo creíble, otros señalan que la inteligencia estadounidense aún estima que Irán tardaría en varios meses o a un año. Y acá lo último, un funcionario israelí informó a Irán International que se necesita un ataque militar para destruir la instalación nuclear iraní de Fordo, en las próximas 48 a 72 horas. Esta oportunidad no durará para siempre. Israel está dispuesto a actuar unilateralmente si es necesario. Es decir, actuará solo para destruir esa instalación, sin la participación de Estados Unidos. Y de hecho ya se publicó una portada de The Economist, que eso lo hablaré para otro video, tal vez mañana. Que bueno, acá les muestro la portada. ¿Cómo terminará esto? Como muestra aquí. Acá muestra esta portada publicada el día de hoy. Muestra a la bandera de Irán completamente destruida, fragmentada, donde tiene bastantes interpretaciones interesantes. ¿Cómo terminará esto? Ese es el título de esta portada. Posiblemente hay muchos escenarios. Esto podría ser el preludio, el final de la dictadura de los ayatolá en Irak. La caída del régimen iraní está cerca. O tal vez esto sea el preludio de otro acontecimiento grande, más impactante. Como pueden ver en el centro de la portada hay una bomba, y es parecida a la bomba que va a utilizar Estados Unidos para destruir la instalación nuclear. Eso es un tema que hablaré mañana en otro video. Podría hablar de esta portada, que se titula ¿Dónde terminará la guerra entre Irán e Israel? En peor situación si Donald Trump se precipita. Es decir, si toma la decisión de atacar esa instalación. Entonces ahí tienen esta imagen de la bandera de Irán completamente destruida, fragmentada, lo que indica muchos escenarios. Quién sabe si esto sea el preludio de la caída del régimen iraní. Esa es una de las posibilidades. O tal vez sea el preludio de otra escalada mucho mayor. Es un tema para otro video, para el día de mañana. Tal vez haga un video al respecto de esto, o otra transmisión hablando de esta portada. Pero esta es la última portada que se publicó de The Economist. Y vemos cómo está el Medio Oriente en estos momentos. Así está Israel y Irán. Acá lo último sobre el estrecho Hormuz. El director ejecutivo de Shell o a Bloomberg: advertimos de un impacto potencialmente masivo si se cierra el estrecho Hormuz y de un shock importante para los mercados petroleros. Esto es bastante interesante en caso de que Irán, yo creo que Irán ya tiene considerado cerrar el estrecho Hormuz, y en caso tal si se mete Estados Unidos o si Israel le destruye su instalación en Fordow. Así que ahí está lo último. Agencia de noticias iraní Fars: explosiones en Teherán. Como la televisión iraní está completamente censurada, no hay televisión, no hay internet, y es poco lo que es poco lo que se informa aquí. Pero acá evidentemente hay muchos bombardeos en la capital Teherán y en otras zonas de Irán. Lo malo es que la televisión iraní no hay mucha información, no hay internet, y es difícil informarse de lo que pasa allá. Como es un régimen, Irán es un régimen que censura todo, libertad de expresión, la internet, los medios de comunicación, igual que este dictador otro, el Maduro. Ojalá caiga el maldito, pero bueno, ¿qué le vamos a pedir? Acá hace 16 minutos Canal 12 Israel, hacia acá ya lo informé, que el establishment de seguridad está monitoreando los intentos iraníes de atacar misiones o embajadas israelíes en todo el mundo. Como el antisemitismo volvió a crecer otra vez, volvió a crecer el antisemitismo, es posible que sucedan estas cosas. Es como si volviéramos a la época de los nazis, pero esta vez son la propia izquierda, los propios progres que se volvieron nazis y hablan como si la derecha fueran nazis, pero ellos son más nazis que los propios nazis y antisemitas, para que se hagan una idea. Y este es otro nazi, otro fascista, que se cree de izquierda, pero son fascistas. Todas estas dictaduras zurdas actúan como fascistas. Y acá el último ataque que sucedió, el viceministro de Asuntos Exteriores de Irán, Al-Baseb, advierte que la participación de Estados Unidos en los ataques israelíes causaría un infierno para toda la región y un atolladero para Estados Unidos. Y eso es el problema, es por eso Donald Trump lo está masticando despacio, porque un conflicto en esta zona del Medio Oriente podría ser, posiblemente, podría traerle más problemas que beneficios. Incluso se especularía de que al final Donald Trump dirá que no va a participar en el conflicto y va a dejar a Israel que actúe solo. Ese es otro escenario. De hecho, acá en este artículo de la BBC, de hecho, acá dice que un ministro iraní le dice a la BBC que Estados Unidos se unirá a los ataques israelíes, causaría un infierno. De hecho, sí, hay posibilidades de que se desate un conflicto mucho mayor en el Medio Oriente. E incluso ya le pregunté al ChatGPT de las repercusiones que esto causaría. De hecho, ya es 20 de junio, allá en Israel ya está amaneciendo y se cumplen casi 8 días desde el ataque del martes 13 de junio en Irán. Posiblemente se espera que el día de hoy, o sea, allá en Israel, posiblemente Irán tenga preparado otro ataque con misiles, como hizo en el día de hoy. Posiblemente. Por eso estoy al pendiente de esta transmisión en vivo. Ya está amaneciendo en el Medio Oriente, en Israel. De hecho, son las 4:45 de la madrugada allá, en Jerusalén y en Tel Aviv. Mientras que en Irán ya son las 5 de la mañana. Así que los dejaré pendientes, o estaré pendiente de lo que pase en el Medio Oriente. Posiblemente Irán podría lanzar otro ataque con misiles, como hizo en esta mañana. Y no se sabe qué repercusiones traerá esto. Lo único que puedo decir yo al respecto, los ataques de Irán son bastante sucios, son ataques sucios. No están atacando instalaciones militares, no están atacando infraestructura, simplemente lanzan misiles a lo loco a la población civil. Son ataques sucios lo que está haciendo Irán. Mientras tanto, Israel está haciendo ataques quirúrgicos, le está acabando todas sus instalaciones del régimen. Incluso en el primer día ya le eliminó a casi toda la cúpula militar del régimen de Irán. Duro golpe le está dando Israel a Irán, que prácticamente Israel ya tiene posesión del espacio aéreo iraní. Incluso también se habla de que esa es otra razón del por qué Irán no está lanzando tantos misiles, porque Israel intercepta los lanzaderas y se las destruye de una vez. Y es por eso que los iraníes a lo rata sacan los misiles desde sus cuevas y lanzan los misiles y luego se esconden. Y es por eso que necesita la ayuda de Estados Unidos para destruir todas esas cuevas, túneles subterráneos, porque ahí es donde están escondidos todo el régimen, en cuevas. Ya no están en la ciudad, están en cuevas. Por eso necesitan esas bombas antibúnkeres para destruir todas esas instalaciones. Y no se descarta que Irán lance otro tipo de ataque sucio contra la población civil. No se descarta. Pero ¿esto qué causará? En caso tal de que logre misiles impactar en zonas pobladas donde hay civiles, eso solo causará que Israel responda con más fuerza y más violencia. Incluso ya tengan pensado ya eliminar al ayatolá, como se llame ese tipo, el mesías de los islámicos, el Jamenei, ¿cómo se llama? Así se llama Jamenei, el ayatolá Jamenei, que se lo elimine, y falta le gana a Israel para eliminarlo, y es cuestión de tiempo. Si Israel actúa solo sin la participación de Estados Unidos, tenga en cuenta será que no va a dejar títere con cabeza, va a eliminar toda la cúpula de los ayatolás, y lo va a hacer, así como eliminó a toda la cúpula de los iraníes, toda la cúpula militar. Entonces, lo que está haciendo Irán de lanzar misiles a la loca contra la población civil es simplemente hacer que Israel ataque con más fuerza y más precisión y más le destruyan más instalaciones. Eso es lo que está haciendo Irán. De hecho, Irán no le ha dado ningún objetivo fuerte que haya causado daños a infraestructura ni nada. Simplemente disparan misiles a lo loco, donde caiga, como dice por ahí, donde caiga el misil en zonas pobladas. Y menos mal que con la cúpula de hierro logró evitarse una catástrofe mucho mayor. Sin la cúpula de hierro de Israel sería catastrófico, más catastrófico. Y bueno, por ahora está toda la información. Veremos qué va a pasar en las próximas horas. Y nos vemos más adelante, les vengo con más información.
Cannot be more miraculous in this war against Iran. So please help us understand the significance of this day in history, looking back at Persia and why it's being seen right now as so relevant. What can you tell us?
Yes, it's very rare to have a very specific date like we have today. The 23rd of the month of Sivan, which is the month we're working right now, is actually not a date that is well known to many people. Normally we commemorate the miracle of being liberated from Persia, from the first Iranian regime, if one could say so, on Purim, which is the day of where everything flips over. But the truth is that it all happened on this day. This is the day when the Jewish people were, their whole attitude about themselves has changed because they were given permission to defend themselves, and the moment they were given that permission, something amazing happened. I'll just take you back in a little bit of history. According to ancient Jewish wisdom, this story took place around 2,400 years ago, after the destruction of the first temple, when the Jews were exiled, and it was around 70 years, some around maybe even 70 years like we have today, after the exile, and they wanted to come back to the land of Israel and rebuild the second temple. But there was an Iranian regime. Iran didn't exist at that time, but it was the Persian Empire, and Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people across the entire world. And he set out a decree to do it. But it was on this day, 2,000, around 400 years ago, that the Jewish people, under the leadership of Queen Esther and Mordecai, were able to write letters back to the people and to say, you have the right to defend yourself until the 13th of the month of Adar. Something amazing happened. Just like Moses, that they can defend themselves, they got more energy and they understood that we have a mission. And therefore, the fear of all the nations who wanted to eradicate them started getting understanding who the Jewish people are, and they weren't going to change the world order. And what's amazing right now, we're 70 plus years from the New State, and now we have a regime from Persia who wants to eradicate the Jewish people. We can only imagine what it would have been if their plans would have actualized, and we have the permission, and this is what we're looking also maybe to the king of the modern world. We can call out to President Trump. We're looking for the nations of the world to say yes, finish the job. We understand that we have that mission to make this world a better place. And this is a historical moment where we're no longer just responding to anti-Semitism, to people who are trying to kill us. We are rising up like lion. When you fall down, you rise back up. We fell down on the 7th of October. We fell down at the Holocaust. Now we are rising up like a fierce lion, dominating the entire region and changing world order for the first time since those days, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago.
And when you talk about Operation Rising Lion against Iran, at the same time, the nation is more than 20 months into the war since the Hamas onslaught on the 7th of October. We're taking care in studio, 53 hostages in terror captivity. This is a resilient nation amidst the war, hoping and waiting for news on the fate of the hostages very briefly. A message or an insight that you can share for the nation right now very briefly.
So we are living in difficult times, but rising up. Again, like I said, the name of the operation is, if you look at the verse in Hebrew, it says you will rise up like a baby lion, and then you will be mighty like a fierce lion. We fell down, and we rose up. Now we're ready to be mighty like a fierce lion. And might in Judaism and Jewish wisdom is to really control ourselves, not to be fearful, not to be anxious. Who's a mighty person, someone who's able to control himself. We're not here to try to control anybody else but ourselves. And if we control ourselves inside, we will merit to see the hostages coming home, and all of this will be behind us, and there will be a new world reality in the Middle East. And we're going to eradicate evil from the world. It's exciting times for the world. It's very difficult. We need to be strong and make our way through it. But then hopefully we will see a new reality for our children and for ourselves.
Rabbi Etiel Goldberg, we so appreciate your insights and your message and your positivity. Thank you very much. Live from Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Parting shot, Yaakov Lapin, we're talking about the changing Middle East unfolding in front of our eyes.
Most of that change will be found in the comments made by the chief of IDF intelligence, Shlomo Bingo, telling his soldiers today that they have enabled, because of their efforts and the technology that was put into play, in the way that the jets are receiving real-time intelligence as they fly over Iran, that they have turned Iran from a third circle to a first circle arena. What that means in normal speak is that Iran is basically like a neighbor. Its proximity is much closer in terms of operational capability. It's not being, it doesn't take time to detect a target 1,500 kilometers away. It takes very little time to detect and to strike it, and that's a revolution in Israeli capabilities.
Revolution in Israeli capabilities, changing times unfolding in front of our eyes. Yaakov Lapin, Ariel, Osaran, Ruth, Faisal, so appreciate you all being here in the studio. Thank you so much. Feels like history is unfolding. Thank you for being there with us on this special session. Appreciate you watching. I'm Denise and the links and up there. Stay tuned. Typical what's saying this is I-27 News.
We see all these videos, these shocking
want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
How do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on i24 News.
Pay as little as $25 per month. That's your dollars about now.
Last thing I'll say is, it's so maddening, especially Iran inside Iran, what because the nuclear point is, Iran's right to nuclear energy. This is not a point of survival. This is a point of pride. If
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video on Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary. All at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video on Demand app today.
Good evening and welcome to this i24 News special edition. I'm Emily Francis. Our top story, Israel is vowing to intensify attacks on what government officials call, quote, the tyrants in Tehran. This following this morning's massive ballistic missile barrage impacting several areas of central Israel as well as the largest hospital in southern Israel. Israel's defense secretary accused Iran of war crimes and said that Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei would be held accountable. In what many are calling miraculous, no one was killed in this morning's barrage of nearly 30 missiles from Iran, but there were dozens of injuries, but also incredible rescues. Take a look at these babies being brought out to safety by rescue workers in the early morning hours. Climbed the stairs of a Ramat Gan high-rise and were able to rescue these children as well as adults. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force today did continue targeting nuclear and military strongholds in Iran, with Mossad teams working on the ground inside of the country, all with the plan to eliminate the existential threat of the supreme leader and his regime. The question does still remain today, what will President Trump decide? To get the U.S. military involved or not? That is a decision that he has been weighing and making that quite public. But in the meantime, we are going to head to Ramat Gan with which was at ground zero this morning of a terrifying direct hit on a residential high-rise with reverberations in up to 20 neighboring buildings affected, as well as storefronts getting blown to shreds. I'm joined now by I-24 News correspondent Balir Sledin, who is at the scene with the latest this evening. Good evening, Balir.
Yes, good evening, Emily. As you've said, one of the sites today in the barrage that targeted central Israel just landed here. The missile behind me, and as a result of it, a large number of buildings have been affected. Specifically, 9 of them actually were damaged. Unfortunately, some of them are going to be demolished. This is, of course, very serious, but more important than that, of course, the one person who is in a serious condition tonight, and another 36 people that were considered to be under mild or moderate condition. There were injuries, of course, all over the buildings that surround this area. And this affected as well a number of embassies. So the embassy of Austria and Lita were damaged as well as a result of this barrage of missiles. And the Indian embassy, where we have been told that actually the workers there have left the country, just yesterday through the border crossing with Egypt, and from there they took the plane to India back home after they felt that the situation is becoming very serious in Israel, very dangerous, and of course their lives have been saved now. All of these embassies were affected as a result of this missile that was fired from around this building as well.
All right, thank you very much, I-24 News correspondent Balir Sledin. Also making international news, a direct ballistic missile strike at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, which is in Israel's Negev desert. Although scores of patients and medical staff were injured, a deadly tragedy was averted. Here's more from I-24 News correspondent Nicole Zedek.
Here at Soroka Medical Center, Israel's largest hospital in southern Israel, serving roughly 1 million residents in the Negev. Now it's out of commission following earlier today ballistic missile attack at the old surgical ward here. Now, the old surgical ward was here, but this is the entrance to the new surgical ward, and even inside, the damage is something to behold. You see glass completely shattered in the hallway. All of the panels for the ceiling are completely shattered and on the ground, but this is the newly enforced building. It's the old building where we were earlier today that you truly see the damage, but it's amazing because it was only 24 hours earlier that that old surgical ward was evacuated. In fact, there were no patients inside when that ballistic missile attack hit. And this in itself is likely saved many, many lives. 71 people were injured here as they were rushing to their safe place. Some of them even lightly injured from anxiety, from panic attacks. But the fact that it was just 71 lightly injured is likely because that old surgical ward was only evacuated early in the day. Now, I did speak to the international spokesperson for the police unit earlier, right in front of that old surgical building, and he talked about the different rescue efforts that all of these teams have to do in an emergency situation like this, and something that they say they're ready and prepared to continue to do as this war continues. Here's what the police spokesperson had to say.
We train for this, like I said, year-round, but we're also holding dynamic situational assessments. That means that we have all the different police commanders being in touch with all the various agencies like the Home Front Command so that we can cooperate when it comes to a scene like this and do it as fast as possible. We have the same goal here, to save lives, and that's what we're going to keep doing. But I do want to ask the public who's listening right now to keep listening to the instructions of the Home Front Command. The Iranian regime has fired well over 400 missiles at us. That's not even counting the drones. And there's been about 40 or so impacts. Now, we can look at it as a miracle that the Israeli defense systems are covering. They're thwarting and intercepting over 90% of those targeting our civilians. But when an impact does land, it is extremely dangerous. You see behind me the extent of the damage. The fact that the Israel public has been listening to us so carefully and being so responsible until now is the reason why the casualty numbers are so low. It's obviously heartbreaking that we have even one casualty, but if they weren't listening to us, it would be much worse.
So teams say that they are prepared to continue to respond to these calls. Meanwhile, all of the patients have been evacuated from this building. They're completely shut down except for any life-saving medical emergencies. Those will continue to operate here, but for the most part, all of the patients have been evacuated to other hospitals throughout other places of Israel, whether that's Tel Aviv, Tikva, Ashdod. This is where all of these patients had to be transported. Now, there is something to be said about this. Iran's claims this is a civilian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on social media claimed that Iran was trying to target a military base nearby, and that the damage here was caused by the shockwave in the area. However, that is a complete lie. The closest military base is roughly 2 kilometers away from here. There's no damage there at all. In fact, I spoke to the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs earlier about this narrative that Iran is trying to spew abroad. Let's listen to what he had to say.
The Iranians are lying, and they are doing it without even a blink. What we are doing, we are showing the world the truth. We brought here dozens of foreign journalists for them to see in their own eyes. This is a civilian hospital. In fact, it's a university hospital. Like you said, serving health services to Bedouins, Jews, Christians. And this attack of the Iranian regime is just another example of the Iranian attacks against civilian population, civilian infrastructure. And this is what the Iranian regime is doing. They are going after our hospitals, they are going after our children, they are going after civilians. If you take a look at the AFP coverage, it seems that they are taking their talking points from the Iranian supreme leader, Khamenei. The fact of the matter is that we're dealing with a direct attack on a civilian university hospital, and yet the Iranians, and unfortunately some of the media outlets in the international arena are distorting the truth and not telling the story as is. We are here in this operation in order to remove a double existential threat. The first is the nuclear one, and the second is the ballistic one. And while doing so, we're going very directly, very targeted after military objectives. On the other hand, the Iranians are doing everything possible to harm and to kill and to damage civilian infrastructure. And I can tell you on a personal basis, every night since this operation started, me, my wife, my 2 daughters are spending the nights in the shelter. We live in a civilian neighborhood. I'm a civilian official, yet the Iranians are attacking civilians.
So clearly, as the war does continue, so does the public diplomacy battle abroad. That's why they took so many journalists here to this scene, this civilian hospital, where luckily quite the damage that you can see, but no one was severely injured. However, the hospital is completely out of commission, leaving some 1 million residents without a nearby hospital. But as I mentioned, those needing critical attention, those have been transported to others. For the most part, the cleanup efforts remain here at Soroka. Reporting from Beersheba for I-24 News, I'm Rosetta.
Joining us now in the studio is I-24 News, Middle East correspondent Ariel Osorano. First of all, before we get into the mission within Iran, it's just hard to put your head around the fact that nobody seems to be appalled by the fact that a civilian hospital was targeted. Yet when we're dealing with the war against Hamas and we've got operatives in a hospital, the whole world is quick to blame Israel.
The double standard here is really mind-blowing. When Israel goes after Hamas installations under hospitals in the Gaza Strip, it provides proof of that, and yet those are downplayed. Here, this is a clear attack on a clearly civilian key infrastructure. We're talking about a hospital, one of the most sensitive sites a country can have. And not only is this written off like the Associated Press said, a strike on a medical building when failing to describe Israel's the largest hospital in southern Israel, but many were even amplifying claims that this was there was a military installation flipping Israel's narrative against it in a complete and utterly blatant lie. Israel does not need to hide military installations under hospitals. Israel doesn't need and doesn't use its civilian population as human shields. In fact, according to Nicole's reporting, the closest military base is 2 kilometers away, all above ground, because Israel doesn't need to hide because it is a legitimate country having legitimate military installations. The fact, and Abbas Sarabji, the Iranian foreign minister, in his accusations, said that this hospital treats IDF soldiers fighting in the Gaza Strip, turning into a military installation. Sorry, but hospitals treating people, that's what it does, that's what it's there for. So this is another a long list of omissions by the global, the mainstream media that once again fail to point the finger where it needs to be and when it needs to be. Ultimately, targeting a hospital in Israel is one of the worst targets you can choose.
And then everybody believing him, oh, we were targeting here, like they in Iran actually know the GPS and the ways of Israel, like, oh, let's believe them. Let's believe them.
I hope no viewer is second guessing the fact that when Iran hits a hospital in Israel, they intended to hit that hospital in Israel. They targeted it, and Iran always boasts at how precise their missiles are. So when they don't hit, they say they still say they targeted it. They say, no, we didn't target it at all. Iran needs to be held accountable for this heinous crime, and going after hospitals is the lowest of the worst of crimes that you can do, especially when there is no military purpose. If indeed this is a military installation, share the proof. Where's the proof? Go with your teams to the tunnels, but this doesn't exist. But the fact that this is a claim that Israel puts against Hamas shows adequate proof of that. This is, and the fact that this is being used against Israel just shows the levels of cynicism that Israel's adversaries.
Perpetuates what we already know after covering this war since October 7th. Now let's talk about the operation in Iran today. They said they were able to target a couple of nuclear facilities. Tell us more about this place and the significance and what it means that they were able to.
Yeah, we're talking about the Khondam heavy water reactor, formerly known as the Iraq heavy water reactor. This is an inactive nuclear plant, but ultimately still maintains the capability to enrich plutonium. It is believed that the Iranians have been using it to enrich plutonium to low levels. Now, there is great, but that is after they were forced to close the site. And according to the IAEA, the site is under construction, and if they were to complete its construction, it would have allowed them to get to high levels of enrichment. So this is what Israel went after in Iraq. What we're seeing right now, they went after the reactor sealed door. That's what was struck overnight. Also, Israel once again targeting the Natanz enrichment facility. To my count, this is the third strike so far. And according to the IAEA, most, if not all, of the damage was caused to the above-ground facility. However, that includes the electricity infrastructure that powers the below-ground 14,000 centrifuges that are used to enrich uranium. And according to Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA, who Iran vows to take military and legal action against him, and even one of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's advisors threatened him in the most blatant of terms, saying that once the war is over, we will hold Rafael Grossi personally accountable for what is going on. He is indicating that the loss of power has indeed most likely destroyed most, if not all, of the underground centrifuges.
All right, so we'll be back with you in a short while. Now we're turning to President Trump, who has said time and again this week that he's running out of patience and is still on the fence about whether to take military action or not. Diplomatic sources told Reuters that Iran's foreign minister spoke several times this week to President Trump's Middle East envoys. Witkoff, foreign minister Araghchi, reportedly told him that Tehran is ready to return to negotiations on a nuclear deal if the U.S. convinces Israel to stop the war. This evening, Trump's advisors arrived for another meeting in the White House situation. Let's take a listen to White House spokesperson a bit earlier.
I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks. No enrichment of uranium, and it would absolutely not. Iran is not absolutely not able to achieve a nuclear weapon. The president has been very clear about that.
We're now heading to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by I-24 News senior international correspondent Mike Wagenheim. Good evening to you. We did just hear from Trump's spokesperson. He's been back and forth, I'll decide, and now he's saying 2 weeks. So it's a bit confusing. So if you're Iran, what are you taking from this wishy-washiness and changing timelines?
First off, just to clarify something, you didn't say Caroline Leavitt didn't say in 2 weeks. She said within 2 weeks, so it could be before that. But if you're Iran, there's two different ways of looking at this. Number one, Trump says 2 weeks about everything. That's always his timetable. It's been his timetable on military action, on trade, on infrastructure, on health, whatever it is. It's always 2 weeks, and he rarely hits that mark. But on the flip side of that, he gave them 60 days to get negotiations done, and Israel struck on the 61st. Trump pointed that out, that he gave them 60 days, and they should have taken him seriously. So, if you're Iran, 2 weeks usually doesn't mean something with Trump, but going up against him again could prove to be even more fatal this time around. I'm not sure if they should chance that, but in the larger picture, what it means is that Trump is hesitant here. He's hesitant to pull the trigger on military action. He's risk-averse, which is not surprising based on his history as his commander-in-chief, and wants to explore any avenue possible to try to get a deal done and keep the U.S. military out of it. I think the bigger question now at this very moment is if he is saying that talks need to be had or he's going to strike, and the Iranians are saying that they will not have negotiations under duress, under fire, well, then does that mean that Trump is going to tell or strongly suggest to Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel needs to hold their fire a little bit for a little while to try to bring Iran back to the negotiating table again to try to get a deal done? That's the larger question, I think, at this point, rather than is Trump really serious about a 2-week deadline?
Yeah, okay, one-sided, that's if Israel stops, but what about Iran when all of us haven't slept for a week, going into shelter several times in the middle of the night?
I would imagine if Israel stops, Iran's going to stop, and if they're not going to stop, there'd be no reason to sit down and talk to them to begin with. I think Trump might be looking here for some sort of halt in the hostilities. He's made clear, though, he's not looking for a ceasefire. Remember, he's looking for total victory. He's looking for the elimination of the Iranian nuclear program, but obviously he's opening the door for talks again, and if Iran is going to say, well, we're not going to do it under fire, then the only option left, logically, would be a ceasefire, a halt in the hostilities until we find out one way or another whether Iran is going to make a deal or not. But we can all see, all from experience, a decade plus now going back to the JCPOA, where this is heading. Iran will bide as much time as they can. Inevitably, Donald Trump's going to face the same decision in 2 weeks or whenever he decides it's time to pull the trigger.
Within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks. All right.
Within 2 weeks. That's what Europe does.
Thank you, Mike. And with Iran's supreme leader continuing to warn of serious consequences if the U.S. does get involved in the war, what exactly does that mean? We are now also heading to a guest via Zoom from Washington, and it's the Iran research analyst, Jonathan Sayed. Thank you for being here. Good evening, and we've heard a lot of talk from President Trump just in the past few days, and then saying he's agreed to some kind of structure. So how close is he to making a decision, and how is the not making a decision affecting or not affecting the supreme leader of Iran?
From the supreme leader's perspective, they would try their best to turn this into a political issue. Given their tactical losses on the ground, they would try to appeal to a different Western audience by dragging American troops. Well, of course, President Trump ran a campaign to say that he's going to stop all wars. So they would definitely try to leverage that from a propaganda perspective to try to amplify pressure against Trump internally in the United States.
And do they have real reason to fear if President Trump does decide to engage in this war?
They certainly have a real fear of that. So when we talk about Iran's military capabilities, it comes down to the ballistic missiles, of course, and Israelis are experiencing that firsthand. The issue with that is specifically the launcher. So the stockpiles aside that Israel has targeted, Iran continues to have the biggest arsenal of missiles in the Middle East. But given that Israel recently stated that they had eliminated 2/3 of the launchers, I think at this point Iran only has about 100 left. Another angle is just assessing how many rockets Iran is launching at Israel. Originally they started about 100 to 200 per day, and now that number has declined a bit, which tells us that to an extent from their perspective this is not necessarily sustainable because they don't have their manufacturing sites either, so they need to keep some missiles at least at hand in case America wishes to join the war.
And also, let's talk about the nuclear sites. We know that there was a lot accomplished on the part of the IDF throughout the day. How much damage has actually been inflicted, and is it enough to stall any kind of nuclear program?
It has definitely hindered their ability to continue their nuclear program. So we're talking about 4 main sites. We're talking about Iraq, in the center of the country, that is mostly a heavy water reactor. That has been affected, I think today and yesterday, both days, there were heavy strikes against Iraq in the water facility. In addition to that, you have the Isfahan enrichment that has also again been targeted by Israel more than once, which brings us to the main one, Fordo and Natanz. When we talk about Natanz, there is an overground section and there's an underground. The overground has been greatly injured or damaged, if you will. But when we talk about the underground capability, the assessment is that by targeting the electric grid, they were able to quote-unquote disrupt the thousands of centrifuges that they have down there. The issue continues to be Fordo. Given that it's mostly underground, there is no real evidence of substantial damaging as Fordo, even though there were heavy strikes. And that is the key issue that America is assessing for their way in or out.
And talk about what would happen if Israel does attack Iran on the ground. Do they have any kind of air defense system, anything that we have here in Israel to warn these incidences?
That's what's rather surprising. So the Islamic Republic leadership, especially the IRGC, most of them are veterans of the Iran-Iraq war when Saddam Hussein was bombing Tehran. So you would assume that given their experience, they would install some sort of like you have like the radar system in Israel with the sirens, none of that. Hearing more and more concern from citizens inside saying that there is basically no infrastructure in place for us to know when air raids are happening. So in addition to that, of course, their air defense systems have been severely deteriorated. So Iran at this point, I think the best way to categorize it is that their skies are free for Israeli operations.
Now let's talk about the possibility of the regime falling. Of course, people calling to, we know where the supreme leader is, according to, Israel and President Trump. Is there a real possibility, given that so much of the infrastructure has been taken out?
The supreme leader is only a pillar of the Islamic Republic. Of course, the issue would be the IRGC specifically when it comes to regime change. There's different, we're not just only talking about one apparatus. We're talking about a range of institutions. You have the LEF, which is the law enforcement that Israel selects. So if the policy were to actually be regime change, which we're increasingly seeing signs of, for example, the hacking of the state on TV and the targeting of different police stations across Tehran, that needs to be coupled with effective messaging towards Iranians. Because it is challenging to expect Iranians to come to the streets as their air raids take place. So when it comes to the issue of regime change specifically, Khamenei is definitely a catalyst, but it would not necessarily directly lead to regime change.
All right, thank you very much, Jonathan, for your insight.
Thank you, Ralph.
And we're going to take a short break. Please don't go anywhere. We'll be back.
And its readiness to resume contact with the US to work out possible solutions that would remove any unfounded suspicions and prejudices regarding Tehran's nuclear program, provided that Israel stops its attacks. Moscow supports this approach and firmly believes that a solution can only be achieved through diplomacy and negotiations. The goals of nuclear non-proliferation, which are fundamentally based on the NPT, should not be achieved through aggression at the cost of innocent lives.
Foreign tool is the Fat Freezer Platinum, the first home-use fat reduction device that freezes away stubborn fat.
Like most people, I always believed that diet and exercise would be enough to reduce stubborn fat.
The Fat Freezer Platinum uses technology to freeze away stubborn fat from the comfort of your own home. To optimize results, the Fat Freezer Platinum uses bare light. The Fat Freezer Platinum will help you sculpt your body in exactly the way you want and keep it that way. It's safe, simple to use, and the bottom line is, it really works. The Fat Freezer uses a medically known technology called cryolipolysis, used in high-end clinics all across the globe.
Now, things continue to have this kind of restrictive then people are looking. The reality is that today, if they were far more solid than they did, say, ways of the rise of Chinese support for Pakistan and its military support for Al-Qaeda, you saw that they were all here, which they had been doing genocide. You said this recently that Iran massive support. I get it that Iran wants to have its own capabilities and not rely on us, but at the end of the day, I think everybody, particularly the Muslims, recognize that the West will never give up on back on the control because the money lender mafia want that. And part of the also worries that actually they want this kind of collapsing or meltdown because they screwed up so badly and they're collapsing in the West. They're in a tussle with each other. Is it that they actually want to I don't know.
Es decir, la última información que les tengo es que el día de mañana el presidente va a tener una reunión de seguridad nacional en la oficina oval el día de mañana a las 11 de la mañana sin acceso a medios de comunicación. Es decir, algo va a pasar el día de mañana, reunión de seguridad nacional el día de mañana. Y aquí curiosamente también informa que dos fuentes de seguridad israelíes dijeron al Irán International que un ataque conjunto con Estados Unidos a las instalaciones nucleares de Fordow siguen siendo considerados como el escenario más probable. Un ataque podría estar en marcha ya el viernes por la noche, añadieron. Es decir, el día de mañana. No se sabe si el día de mañana 20 de junio, Donald Trump ya tenga la autorización o tal, la orden de atacar esas instalaciones de Irán, porque curiosamente mañana a las 11 de la mañana va a haber una reunión de seguridad nacional en la oficina oval sin acceso a la prensa. Entonces algo va a suceder el día de mañana, como dije ayer. Posiblemente mañana, 20 de junio, Estados Unidos va a atacar la instalación nuclear de Fordow en Irán. Hay que tener en cuenta esto. Esto es la última información que les tengo. Lo otro es que tengo que desconectarme un momento porque tengo que arreglar unos detalles del OBS y configurar porque se me está lagueando, y ya regreso. En un momento regreso